don't blast your entire 2-year list, right? The people that didn't open from 2 years ago, don't mail them all at once. Don't go mail the 5,000, the 50,000, 500,000 people that haven't heard from you or opened emails or engaged in 2 years. As Jimmy mentioned, that's like the easiest, surest way to go blow up your deliverability, right? So warm up slowly. The more slowly, the better. Obviously, right, if you have a really large list, don't send to 500 people at a time. You know, if you have tens of thousands of people that you're mailing, you can go a little bit faster, but slow and steady wins the race there. Starting with kind of, again, the more recent people, so that 3 to 6 months, just to see, what happens. That's going to be the best segment to re-engage. And if those people don't engage, it's like, well, good luck trying to re-engage everyone else.
All and everything we do all starts with having a good product or service. You're not going to revive people who hate your product or hate your service. If there's a product problem, it's not a marketing problem. And no matter how great your email or SMS is going to do, it ain't going to fix it. I just want to kind of reiterate that to make sure that people do remember, you can't make magic with email or SMS, no matter how good you are, if the product sucks ultimately. Yo, Chase, what's good, dude?
How are you, man?
I'm good, man. I'm excited about today's pod just because I've seen people in our community asking this question a lot.
What's the question?
Well, people asking, and I saw Lorenzo recently asking this in the community, but people want to know about reactivation, man. I think it's a popular topic, with everything going on in the market today. People are really curious about what it takes to reactivate a list. And I thought it'd be great to do a pod on it just because I feel like I'm answering the same question in the community over and over again. And the best way to do it is to shoot a video about it, tell it once, and tell people where to go to talk about it or listen to it, I guess.
Amazing. Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and shoot this thing in 3, 2, 1.
From the open to the click, they're the masters of the flow. Just watch your list grow and your leads turn to go. Did we retain you so far, or do we have to extend it? If you want results, you gotta send it. Yeah, you gotta send it. Yeah, you gotta send it. Yeah, you gotta send it.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Send It Pod, where we discuss anything and everything email and SMS, specifically in e-commerce. My name is Jimmy Kim, and I'm here with my co-host,
Chase Dimond.
All right, Chase. Today, we're tackling a big pain point for many e-commerce brands. We're talking about reactivating aged email leads or email leads that people have been emailed. I'm talking about things that are 3 months, 6 months, even up to 5 years old here today. We're going to talk about how they approach them without damaging deliverability. How do they actually win them back? So if you've got an old list here, or you've got one that hasn't been emailed in ages, or you notice your subscribers are fading away, this episode is for you. We'll break down everything from segment strategies to re-engagement tactics to compliance and delivery considerations. And we'll even jump into some examples of how we should be approaching it. So let's jump in right now. All right, Chase, I want to start off with the simplest and the question that people are going to ask. Chase, why should we even bother with these older leads?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually really timely. I had my newsletter go out not too long ago, and I actually broadened out the segmentation to be able to reactivate, more people. And every time I do this, I'm able to re-engage, thousands of new people, right? That's thousands of new potential clicks, buyers, etc. So if you're like me, you're like Jimmy, like other people, right? For one, you've already paid money to acquire these people at some point, whether that be an ad, some kind of content, or other form of, marketing spend or sales spend. And if you can even re-engage just a small percentage, that's AKA found money, right? Because you're reviving existing contacts, not paying for new ones. So with that, right? And if you also ignore old lists, it means you might end up with a lot of unengaged or invalid emails stuck in your database, which can hurt your deliverability, right? So it's important to be regularly and strategically engaging and trying to reactivate and revive old folks. And if you can't, that's okay too. You also have to have a process for, making sure that they're not on your list.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And, look, we don't want them to turn in spam traps and hurt your deliverability. That's definitely something you would want to be careful of. And the last thing you want to do is essentially send them spam. Now, the word spam always is like a funny word because spam means unwanted email, right? It doesn't mean that it's bad email. It just means it's unwanted. Even if they subscribed your list 5 years ago and they don't want the email anymore, people can often call that spam. So we always say that. And I want people to be clear when we talk about the word spam, what that really means. So So listen, we need a plan. So I want to start it and build the plan out just like we do in our pods and give people actionable tactics that they can go attack, right? So I want to start talking about segmentation first,
Yeah.
because that's where it all starts, right? And I think this starts with a super basic segmentation of the prospects between the customers. And that's super important here, because a prospect is just simply giving you an email list, where a buyer or a customer, someone who's already spent dollars with you, you've
Yeah.
got a lot more data on those people. So I've split it into 4 buckets here, and I'm gonna kind of tell you about these buckets, and then we're gonna go break them down.
Okay.
The first bucket I think about is 3 to 6 months. I call these the dormant folks. These are people who have not engaged with you in 3 to 6 months. Generally, people are sunsetting, and we call those the dormant folks. Then we've got 6 to 12 months, and I call those the lapsed leads, because now they've started to get pretty aged. 1 to 2 years old, I call that the almost lost lead. And the last, the 2 to 5 years, I call those the ancient leads, right? So I want to start with the 3 to 6 month, the dormant subscriber. Chase, tell me about what you think about when you think about the 3 to 6 month dormant subscriber.
Yeah, for sure. And one kind of quick thing I want to mention with a lot of like the buckets you're talking about, those 4 buckets, I think there's kind of a couple of issues. I think issue one is, dude, we'll audit accounts, and obviously you know this, like some people just aren't mailing certain folks. Like there's a percentage of their list that they're just never mailing. They signed up to your list recently, and for whatever reason, they're not part of your segment. Maybe there was a missync, something's happened. You're just
Yep.
not mailing these folks. There's a lot of people within the 1 to 3 month, the 3 to 6 month, buckets that just haven't been mailed, and that's why they're AKA not engaged. And then the other part of it, right, is maybe you are trying to engage these people, but you have the wrong strategy. So with that being said, kind of the 3 to 6 month, kind of as Jimmy called it, the dormant subscribers, these essentially are folks that haven't opened or haven't clicked in a few months. And more specifically, they haven't opened or clicked within 3 to 6 months. And with these people, right, these are the most recent group of people. So they're likely, hopefully, gonna, again, caveat being hopefully, gonna remember your brand, but for whatever reason, they've drifted. Again, it might be that you just frankly aren't sending them email, and you might go find people that you need to start mailing time and time again. So this is going to be a great strategy, or for something else, right? So this segment right here, out of all the 4 that we're going to talk about, really is your best shot for a quick win. So if you're an agency, if you're a freelancer, you just land a new client, if you're doing an email audit, if you can identify these group of people and really have a strategy and game plan to go after them, this is where you're going to get a quick win, because they're not too far gone. It's not too late.
Exactly. And I like that quick, we miss you campaign, or maybe a small incentive to see if you just needed a general nudge. Sometimes it's just a brand update. Here's what's new since you last opened. The reality with these subscribers, often, to your point, is sometimes they get filtered out. Life got busy. It wasn't the right time. There's so many reasons why it happens. Plus, you got to think about buying cycles, right? Depending on your product, some products people just aren't going to buy except maybe every 3 to 6 months, maybe once a year, whatever it might be. And there's people that fall into this bucket quite often. All right, let's talk about that next segment, the 6 to 12 months lapse ones. These are called the lapse leads. That's what I call them, because they've gotten to this little point where they stopped responding. It's been a while. You've tried, and these are things that you have to think about. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had a friend reach out to me recently that I haven't probably talked to in 6 or 12 months, and it's kind of one of those things where they kind of show back up. So he actually texted me a couple of days ago, and it's one of these like, huh, I wonder what this guy's been up to. I wonder what he's reaching out about, right? Oftentimes, when someone reaches out after 6 or 12 months, they kind of do a little bit of small talk, and then they hit you with the ask. And sure enough, right, it was a little bit of small talk, and then the guy wanted to hop on a call to pick my brain about X, Y, and Z thing,
Of
right?
course.
So it's kind of not too dissimilar to this, right? Where the 6 to 12 month, it's a little bit more serious, right? These folks probably have mentally unsubscribed. So just like with a friendship, when you haven't talked to someone to 6 to 12 months, if you're not making the effort and they're not making the effort, you kind of just assume like maybe you guys aren't friends, right? And with that, like with these people, going back to the segmentation side, you're going to need kind of a stronger incentive and more personalized messaging than you would with that previous 3 to 6 month bucket. With this, some e-commerce brands that we've worked with, some e-commerce brands that we've audit, they'll typically do a larger discount or some kind of product recommendation based on past purchases, just to kind of try to reel people back in, type of a thing.
And one of my favorite ones that I simply put out there is just a simple ask: do you still want to hear from us? Because sometimes That's all it takes to get people to reactivate. And maybe that is a perfect time to say, hey, do you want to hear from us? And say, here's a preference center. Maybe we sent too many emails, which is why you haven't been opening it, and you put us in a folder. Or maybe they just want some monthly updates along the way. But trying to get a response out of these folks is the number one key to it. And I think this is really important when we talk about this later. But just because you got a response doesn't mean they're reactive and live. There is a different level of earning that you have to go into. In fact, that rolls me into the next bucket, which is that almost lost segment. I'm talking about 1 to 2 years late, right? At this point, they're old, they're aged, they haven't engaged. Oftentimes part of the problem, to your point, Chase, is like at 3 months, they cut them off and then they let them lapse forever and they don't kind of retry to re-engage, re-win, and they just continue to let them go. And now they've aged a year old, but now we're all looking for these lists and leads. So what do you think about this little list group?
Hey there, it's Chase, and I really hope you're enjoying this pod. If I can have just 30 quick seconds of your time, I'd love to invite you to our thriving, growing community for retention marketers. Jimmy and I realized that there were no centralized communities for retention marketers like yourself and myself, where we're specifically focused on email and SMS. Most of the communities out there seem to be just for founders or for execs only. And this is really why we're proud to share on this pod that we have over 350 marketers like myself and yourself and Jimmy in a closed community on Slack. And we talk all day, every day about all things email and SMS. So if you're listening to this podcast, I want to invite you to come and join us. And the best news, it's literally $1 to get started for a trial. And with that, you're going to get access to the Slack community, our weekly private newsletter where we share actionable things you can do as an email marketer. And then we also have special meetups and webinars that are specifically retention focused. And with that, you're also going to have direct access to not only myself, but Jimmy as well. So hit us up, ask us what you have, and we're going to be able to deliver you the answers. And then last but not least, you're going to get some special discounts and some other really cool perks. So this is where we're hanging out. It's the best way to come hang out with us, talk with others like us and like yourself. So you've got to come join us. And again, it's called the Ecom Email Certified Community, where you can learn more at ecomemailcertified.com, or just check out the show notes for a direct link. Hope to see you there. And now we're back to the pod. Yeah, I'm with you. So the 1 or 2 years block it's this borderline, who's sending this to me? Like, they're going to kind of question, like, if they didn't have a good relationship with you before and you didn't really send enough, like, who is this person that actually sign up? Like, how did I end up on this list? So hopefully they remember you, right? The reality is they may or may not.
Yep.
And many kind of deliverability experts recommend kind of a final re-permission campaign. So kind of what Jimmy kind of alluded to in the last one, this could be something like confirm if you still want to stay, right? This is asking for permission. And if they don't give you, kind of explicit permission, it's probably best to just remove them. If you can't get them at this point, the likelihood that you're ever going to get them in the future is probably slim to none, right? I think the one exception there is like some people on your list are just going to be a BFCM shoppers, right? So maybe it is an entire year in which they don't engage, but outside that bucket, it is going to be very slim that someone's going to want to hear with you and engage if you send this campaign and they frankly don't respond, right? They may not open it. If they don't click or they don't reply, they're gone. They're out.
100%. It is risky to keep emailing people who haven't opened or clicked in over a year. And I'm with you on the BFCM thing. There is a net to throw there, but this is why I always tell people it's important to start your BFCM with throwing the net early and getting it out there before the actual BFCM comes, because if they're going to buy from your brand about a month before they start re-engaging and they start reconnecting with you, and if they don't bite on that re-engagement, you're right. It's usually best to let them go off for your own deliverability health. This is really, really important. Okay, finally, this is my favorite one because I always have brands that come to me with this. They're like, man, Jimmy, 4 years ago, I had a list of 1 billion people, and then it's dwindled down and blah, blah, blah. How do I reactivate these people from 5 years ago, 2 to 5 years ago? And I call them old ancient contacts. What do you think about that, Chase?
Yeah, the first thing here I think that we both have to say is proceed with caution, right? This is a really big red zone area, and really, quite frankly, a risky one if you don't proceed with caution. So these addresses, a couple of things could happen. One, they could be closed, or two, they can be into spam traps. We've talked about this in previous episodes where the ISPs like the Googles and the Yahoos of the world, anywhere between 12 and 24 months, they're shutting down inactive emails. And if someone has like an AOL or a Yahoo, and they're on your list 5 years ago, the likelihood that they're actually still using that email is probably pretty slim, unless they're an old person, right? Unless they're like our parents or our grandparents and they don't want to get rid of their Yahoo because they don't want to get with the times. It's a good likelihood that they're on Gmail or something net new. And they're not even having access to it, right? So with this, you could do a one-time re-permission, but in tiny batches. That person that you talked about, Jimmy, that had the million people 4 years ago, they shouldn't go reactivate 750,000 of them that are unengaged, or 800,000, or whatever that number was, right? They can't do that all at once. Like, that is going to be a huge, huge, huge issue if they do, right? And with this, right, like, you want to weigh kind of the risk and the reward. Maybe it's not worth reactivating them at all. Maybe for some people it is. You kind of have to weigh that depending on how strong your deliverability is, how good your plan is, how good you are at breaking it up, how relevant your content still or may not be. If you have a product that is a one-time purchase, like maybe a mattress, and you have like a 5 or 10 year warranty, and you're trying to reactivate people that are 4 years old, I don't know. I wouldn't really consider that something super smart. So that's kind of my thought. That could be a red flag in this area. What are your thoughts?
No, I'm with you on that. And look, if you really want to tap into it, the thing that I always start off by recommending clients is like you test a small subset of it first, right? Maybe the buyers, most recent buyers that I have, I'm going to use that data. And if the complaints or bounces start spiking, it's best to stop, because the worst thing you can do is trying to tap into this data and hurt your sender reputation. All right,
And dude,
let's
actually,
shift.
real
Yeah, go
quick,
ahead.
one more thing I want to talk about that we've actually done for clients in the past is, I think one of the best things you can do with these 4 buckets is also upload them to Meta, upload them to Google, and start with some retargeting. And then kind of the segment, so the 3 to 6 months might have some different messaging on retargeting. And then the next 6 to 12 months or whatever it was, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 5 years, upload those as segments, do some retargeting. Keep an eye on who comes back to your website, right? You might have a better chance getting in front of these people on like Meta or TikTok or Google, whatever platform you're using. And then you can see, based off of the targeting and the tracking you have, who comes back to your site. And then maybe for those people, right, those are the people that you start with. And that's kind of how you ease back into that. So I just wanted to give that kind of quick tip, is don't be afraid to combine this type of strategy with top of funnel, just to make sure that you're getting to them and reaching them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you should be, in my opinion, as you're saying that, Chase, like you should be using all your data that you have all the time with your
Yes.
Meta, with your Google, with your TikToks even now. You should be using anything you have, as that data is invaluable when it comes to especially buyers, less maybe prospects, but buyer data. You definitely want to play with that.
Cool.
All right. I want to jump into re-engagement campaign tactics. Like, what do you actually do? Because I know people are going, okay, I hear you loud and clear. I understand where my subsections of my segments are. What do I do once I've built my segments? So, I wrote this down, so I want to kind of explain it to you, but
Okay.
I have different ways to approach it. And I'm going to start with the most basic of strategies, ultimately, of how I would be approaching it. And this is what I would tell my community members and the different people you want to understand, right? So first, you want to start off with your current list size, right? Let's just say you look at your list size and your current list sending strategy. Let's just say you have 50,000 people, okay? What you want is you want to think about this in a 10 to 20% metric for reactivation. So if I went and built my segment of purchasers and I went to, let's just say, the 3 to 6 month purchaser bucket,
Okay.
I want to pull that out. And let's say I have 20,000 people. Great. Now I have 50,000 people in my main list that I'm sending to. That 10% of that is 5,000, right? So then I would split my 20,000 people into 4 buckets of 5,000, because my 5,000 was the goal, which was the 10%. I want to split those into 4 buckets. And then the goal here is to literally layer in 5,000 people to your 50,000 send each send and try to reactivate it. Now, this is the most basic of strategies ultimately, but this is a very safe way to play it, because you're working backwards slowly and you're layering it on. You can't go and add 20,000 people to your 50,000 bucket and not affect deliverability. But 10%, it's pretty decent of a safe bet, because even if you had, several of them bounce, or you had unsubscribes, or any of these things happen, your volume is the thing that comes into place, right? It's always about your total volume of an individual campaign. Layering them into your existing campaign is like the friendliest way to approach it. And it's how I usually start with reactivation campaigns, if you want to do it correctly. The worst thing you can do, in my opinion, is just trying to take those 20,000 and send him a campaign because they're 3 to 6 and think that you're going to get something out of him. That is the worst thing, because now you're hurting your independent delivery of the entire campaign, and of course your domain and your reputation
Yeah.
and all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
But
dude.
there is, oh, go ahead.
So two things to add to that. Yeah, like what you're talking about, like in my mind, I call it like email blending, right? Or
Yep.
essentially like you have this list, right? And you know how they're gonna engage and react, right? You know that this segment is going to get a 50% open rate, a 2% click rate. They're gonna have, I don't know, 0.1% unsubs, and they're gonna have very few to none spam complaints, right? So
Yep.
by layering in, as you're mentioning, like a small percentage, let's call it 10%, you're basically adding padding, and you're going to basically know that no matter what happens with this 10%, assuming that all 10% bounce, right, that you're going to be okay. And you, as a former ESP owner, and obviously we're doing a lot of work with Omnisend, ESPs don't really know nor care about whether a list is purchased or not purchased or this or that. They just care about how they engaged. If you could
Correct.
engage all those people, and even if they're old and they engage favorably, it doesn't matter, right? So that's number one. Number two is actually in Omnisend. One thing that's really interesting is when you send a campaign, they'll tell you what like your safe sending volume is, right? So, let's say my list is 100,000 in Omnisend, right? I will send a 100,000 campaign. If I want to send another campaign, they might say, hey, your safe sending for the day is 110 total. You can actually not only go send 10,000. I thought that was actually really cool and interesting, where they've done the calculations for you and let you know for your domain, for your reputation, for all these factors I'm sure that they're waiting in. This is the number of people you can mail in a single day and quote unquote be safe. Kind of interesting.
Hey, okay, I'm disrupting the pod for just a quick 60-second break and a quick little shout out to our title sponsors of the podcast, Omnisend. Okay, for those that don't know, Omnisend is an all-in-one email and SMS marketing automation platform specifically designed for e-commerce brands. They make it super easy to engage with customers, drive repeat sales, and create those seamless personal experiences we're always talking about. Here's 3 things I love about Omnisend. First and foremost, they're trusted by over 125,000 e-commerce merchants worldwide that absolutely love them. With a 4.8 rating star with over 6,000 reviews on the Shopify App Store, it's an obvious choice for your email, SMS, and push needs. Secondly, I love great customer support. And Omnisend, they're absolutely nailing it. They're responsive, their help docs are great, and their team is absolutely fantastic. And third, they have great features and better pricing. Pricing matters just as much as features, and Omnisend, you're going to get both of those. And they have all the features you need for your store, and their pricing is absolutely fantastic. In fact, recently I just heard a story about 2 community members that made the switch. One reduced his price from $8,500 to $3,500, which is huge, but even bigger, that $3,500 included SMS, which is absolutely wild. Then another agency I just recently talked to, they just switched their entire client base over, and he's been saving his clients anywhere from 30 to 60% off their bill, which is allowing them to take that money and reinvest it on the top of the funnel so they can make more ads and make more money. Omnisend nails these 3 things that I care most about: great support, great features, and fair pricing. Plus, I just helped Chase make the move to Omnisend with his own personal email list, and their migration was super easy. They even have a team to help you support you, and they have a great automated tool to bring your contacts right over. So if you're looking to take your email marketing to the next level, I highly recommend checking out Omnisend. They got the tools, the automation, the expertise to help your brands grow and thrive. Head over to omnisend.com/send it to learn more and start scaling your customer engagement today. Now let them know Chase and Jimmy sent you. Now let's get back to the pod. Yeah, that's volume control. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you don't want to blow up your volume. And that's literally the number one way people end up in a bad position when they're trying to get into reactivation. Look, the reason why people avoid reactivation is because they don't understand it enough. They often are doing it the wrong way and they haven't been taught correctly, which is what we're trying to help the people listening to this pod here today get the right reactivation in place. All right. I want to jump into what I call the multi-email sequencing, because another way to reactivate people is to essentially sequence them into a multi-email campaign. What do you think here when you think about this, Chase?
Yeah, so I'm with you, right? I think like one and done emails, a one-off email just isn't enough, right? You're just not
Yep.
giving yourself enough shots on net for it to be effective. So creating some kind of short series, maybe it's even 2 or 3 emails, right? Over a week or two. The first one could be like the warm greeting. It's like, again, you can't just slide back into the DMs or the inbox and kind of just be like, hey, look at me, right? You kind of want to warm it up, greet it. Again, as I mentioned, that guy that reached out to me, it would have been weird if he just went straight for the ask, right? He kind of has to do the social thing of like, hey, how are you? What's good? How's the family? You kind of want to have a warm, kind of softer landing and greeting. The second one, now that you've done that, could be some kind of sort of incentive or some kind of
Mm.
special offer or some kind of special bundle. And then the third one could kind of be like the gentle follow up, the reminder, the final notice, something of those sorts.
So what you're saying basically is you want to try something like "We miss you" name or
Yes.
whatever, or "Is this goodbye?" or a special offer to
Yep.
welcome you back. Using a little bit of that emotional hook and curiosity. Okay, I like that one. Well, one of the other things I always tell people is like you want to try to get as personalized as possible at this point. You have some data, pull their name, highlight a past category they browse, items they've purchased, show them how you remember them ultimately. Any little personal touch you can add to this is often going to reignite their interest.
Yeah, and with that, I'd say like the industry that we're in is so image heavy that people often underlook or kind of overlook, I guess I should say, copy. So with this, right, like you want to make sure that there's text. It could even be a plain text email, right? That might even land better. And with that, make sure the tone and voice is relevant to the situation. Again, the tone and voice should be custom to the message that you're sending. It shouldn't be one size fits all. So with this, you want to A, keep it conversational, B, you want to acknowledge that they've been gone, right? You kind of take the awkwardness out, acknowledge that, just, say it because they're probably thinking it. And then C, clearly present one main call to action, right? Don't confuse them. Don't have like a million and one things for them. Something should be literally like, check out our newest arrivals or claim your special discount. This way, there's way less friction involved, and the likelihood of them actually taking the action that you're hoping for them to take will therefore be higher.
And dude, ironically, one of the things that I tell people is make it super easy to unsubscribe because, being able to add right on the top, and I'm sure you've seen these email, click here if you no longer want these emails, no hard feelings, for example. Your goal is to protect your reputation and reduce spam complaints. And sometimes it's just as simple as putting it out in front of them and putting it right on the top. And I know that, people don't want to unsubscribe. You just got to remember this. They have stopped responding to you and they are not interested in you. The last thing you want them to do is hit that spam button. And so anything you can do to get in front of them and say, hey, look, you don't want this email, no problem, right? Click here to unsubscribe. You'd rather have the unsubscribe than them going off and clicking spam or junk. All right, Chase, let's build a usable scenario based around this information. Okay, you want to build something for me?
Yeah, so 2 or 3 emails. Okay, so let's go with 3 emails so we can give people more.
Okay.
So I'd say like the 3 emails, kind of just to elaborate on what we talked about. Again, the first one could be something as simple as like I think you said something like "We miss you," right?
Yep.
So let's say like "We miss you," kind of giving them some updates about the brand, and kind of some small offer. But again, in your mind, make sure that when they're receiving this email, that you're addressing like what's in it for them. It can't just be about you, the brand. You can't just be like, hey, here, look at me, right? Like, I'm so great. We're so amazing. Here's all of our accomplishments. It's finding a way to relate to them about what you're doing as a brand and why they should care by having some offer, kind of some relevant products, some recommendations that you think that they're going to like based off past data. That's number one. Let's call it email one. Number two, again, depending on what someone does in the previous email, if they buy, maybe you don't send emails 2 and 3. However, if they click, if they open, or if they don't open, maybe you should send these next emails. So maybe email 2 is something like, hey, it's been a minute. It's been a while, right? Here's 15% off, midweek, hope all is well. Let us know if you have any questions. What can we do for you? Just trying to be helpful, kind of reconnecting, and then giving them something of slightly more value if they didn't convert off that first small offer. It would be weird to give like a 5 or 10% off in email one, then buy, and then be like, oh, here's
No.
15% off. It's like that just seems backwards, right? So again, that's why we want to exclude people from email one if they do purchase. So that's email two. And again, if people purchase on email two, don't send them this next email, email three. However, if they don't buy, send them this kind of last one, like, hey, here's your last chance. We don't want to bother you. We're not desperate. We want to respect you and your wishes. If you want to say subscribe, great. Update your preferences. Buy on this discount. Or if not, it's not rude. No harm, no foul. Just unsubscribe. That's kind of where we're at.
I love that. Very simple, straightforward, clean, no tricks. I think that's the biggest thing that I learned from that is like, we don't want tricks or gimmicks around the things that we're doing. We want to put them in a very clear place. And, this starts to get you thinking more about deliverability and warm up, right? Reactivating a big chunk of old context can be delicate. Chase, How do we protect our domain and IP reputation? When I say, how are you cleaning it? How are you doing this by protecting yourself? What would you say?
Yeah, dude, it's wild to me in e-commerce how few people actually utilize or know of like e-commerce verification tools. I feel like in the world that you were in affiliate world, like that was non-negotiable. Everyone
Yep.
had to do that, right? Because your domain reputation, your business, everything was dependent on it. I don't know if people just assume that like ESPs are going to do this for you, but like you have to use like an email verification tool, right? I mean, there's a million and one tools out there. There's everything from like Kickbox to Never Bounce to Zero Bounce, right? There are just so many out there. If you want a referral or if you want a recommendation or intro, let us know. We'll be happy to make one. But any of those or others that you find, I'm sure, are sufficient. So with that, right, that's going to help you remove kind of obvious bounces or spam traps. They have a way of cleaning your list to give you your best shot at making sure that your domain is healthy and not mailing a bunch of old kind of expired type emails. And then with that, secondly, we want to just kind of remind you again, don't blast your entire 2 year list, right? The people that didn't open from 2 years ago, don't mail them all at once. Don't go mail the 5,000, the 50,000, 500,000 people that haven't heard from you or opened emails or engaged in 2 years. As Jimmy mentioned, that's like the easiest, surest way to go blow up your deliverability, right? So warm up slowly, and the more slowly the better, obviously, right? Like if you have a really large list, don't send to 500 people at a time. If you have tens of thousands of people that you're mailing, you can go a little bit faster, but slow and steady wins the race there, starting with kind of, again, the more recent people, so that 3 to 6 months, just to see what happens. That's going to be the best segment to re-engage. And if those people don't engage, it's like, well, good luck trying to re-engage everyone else. However, if those people re-engage, that's a good sign for you. Hey, it's Chase, taking just 30 seconds of your time because I found something game-changing for e-commerce marketers and agencies. If you happen to be drowning in retention marketing tasks, we have a solution for you. It's AI. There's an AI strategist, AI segmentation, AI email builder. It's called Rayleon, and this is the platform that helps marketers like myself and yourself create everything from emails to custom segmentation based on your data and your email marketing strategy. I mean, imagine getting everything from an audit to campaign planning in just a handful of clicks and in under 5 minutes. Their AI handles everything from segmentation to strategy and creating on-brand copy that actually converts. Brands using Rayleon save about 50% of their retention marketing time and see an average of 3x ROI. Yes, you're going to save time and make more money. Talk about a no-brainer. And this is really why brands like Coast, Ginger Milk, and Life Pro trust them and really utilize them and start recommending them to everyone. So head to Rayleon.io, that's RALEON.io, for a 3 month email AI segmentation playbook in just 60 seconds. Yes, it's 100% free to try, and this will be the best 5 minutes you spend today, I promise. Rayleon.io, let them know that myself and Jimmy sent you, and we're now back to the pod.
Yeah, I love that. And one recommendation as I'm listening to all this that I think about is, remember when you're writing your email that you want to use more of a plain text or a minimal HTML, minimal image type email for that initial send, so you can not only feel personable, but also maximizing the spam filter. I know there's this whole dilemma in this market about image only emails versus text only image, and people will argue with me left and right, especially the ones that use image only emails. But the reality is this: it's very proven that text based is going to help the spam filters read and acknowledge the email a lot quicker than an image based email. So why put yourself at risk?
Dude, 100%. And with that, right, like we've talked about data and testing and analytics all the time. Like when you're sending these, you really do want to pay really close attention to the open rates, the click rates, the unsubs, the bounces, the spam complaints. More than ever, you want to make sure that you really understand your metrics. You want to see how those compare to the industry average. You want to make sure that you're not getting kind of a huge spike in those types of things. So, and if anything does spike and it does look unnatural and there are issues, you probably should consider stopping to send to older segments until you can kind of rebuild and stabilize, right? So you kind of press the gas pedal a little bit, kind of see how the car reacts. If the car just is kind of being a little bit wonky, kind of wait, make sure you fix the engine, make sure the car is running smooth again before you go try to dip your toes back into this strategy.
Absolutely. And one thing that I think that we should talk about is compliance because, I think people talk or are worried about compliance quite often more than ever just because there's so much going on. So, if these leads are from 1 year ago, do we risk running afoul with like GDPR or can spam?
Yeah, I'd say like the kind of just the basics again. Like we're not lawyers here, but kind of just starting with the basics. I'd say like the easiest thing to do is just confirm that they originally opted in, right? And if you're unsure, just double check by doing kind of what we call a re-permission email. Hey, we want love to keep you on the list. We'd love to engage with you. We'd love to chat with you. We'd love to send you special offers X, Y, and Z. But before we do that, can you just confirm that that's okay? Again, if you're unsure, do that. If you have the consent, if you have the kind of the date stamp that they opted in, just ignore that step, right? And however, if you do send this type of email and people ignore it, just remove them. It's probably better just to be a little bit safer. And one pro tip with all of this, like you have to make sure that your unsubscribe link is easy to find. So many people think they're being so sneaky and they're being so clever and smart by hiding it and masking it. It's like, no, that's actually quite dumb. It's actually the opposite. You're masking it, which means you're going to get spam complaints, which means you're going to be way more likely to get in trouble, right? So if EU contacts, I know we have a lot of people listening that mail internationally or they're international, and they've been inactive for over a year, you may want to kind of confirm consent since GDPR leans on recency. So that's a great question.
Yeah, actually, if we're talking about reconfirmation, there's also CASL, which is Canadian rules, right? Canadian spam laws. Basically, they have implied purchase consent, which expires after 2 years. So definitely be mindful of the regional laws. The United States, just to talk about can spam, just to mention it real quick, can spam has an explicit opt-out state. Means very simple. They must always be given an option to opt out, but you do not have to worry about opt-in process. It's kind of a little funky thing that comes into place, which is where Chase was mentioning. You buy a list, it's not illegal to email them. I know people say, oh, it's illegal. It's not illegal. It's just very dangerous when you're working with cold email in a large deliverability scale. All right. Chase, now that we've nailed that down, what about metrics? When do we sunset? When do we decide to sunset? What do you think about when you think about this stuff?
Yeah, look, like I wish these older segments would engage and react and respond much like our current engaged segments, but the reality is they're just not. You are going to see lower opens and clicks and engagement rates as a whole with these older segments, but you do need to measure them, right? Because if you don't measure them, you can't fix them, you can't figure out what's happening, and it's going to be too late. Google and the ISPs and the ESPs are going to tell you, hey, you're really screwing up. And at that point, it's not just a slap on the wrist, like you're in trouble. So let's say like again, it really depends, but a 10 to 15% open rate, that might be good for like the 6 months lap group. While like if you're pushing 2+ years, dude, you might be looking at like low single digit, right? 1, 2, 3%, and that might be normal. So again, lower expectations, but make sure that you're keeping an eye on this and make sure you're on the ball.
100%. I'm with you on that one. And look, it's okay again because if you're sending to your segment, you're layering it on and sprinkling and blending it ultimately. You'll still see the segment activity if you're using a tool like OmniSend, for example, based on the actual send at the segment level. And when you're seeing that, you should be able to still see it, right? You're going to see a lower open rate, and that's still okay because you should expect that. But more importantly to all of that, Chase, one of the things that I think about very importantly is conversions. Did they buy? If not, do you keep trying? Like that's really a thing you have to think about. And the reality is probably not if you can't. And another place to think about is watching those spam complaints. Like if they're above 0.1, 0.2%, that should start raising some red flags because if your engagement after your engagement series, you put them on sunset list, you should stop emailing lists, right? Like just because they're engaged, because you put them in a re-engagement list and they may engage, they may open it. That doesn't mean that they're interested. You've got to see them taking more action on it. So, these are things that you got to think about when you're going through and emailing him, and you got to be okay sunsetting him and listing him. Like to me, if I'm re-engaging him, I'm immediately putting him into another list and saying, okay, these people that are falling into this new list, now I'm going to go try to reactivate him into a sale, or I'm going to still sunset them again because they're not buying. They're not clicking, for example. They're just opening that's not really a signal of engagement. That might have been, oh, I saw a subject line that was really healthy and I opened it. But that doesn't mean I should just blend you back into campaign, because they're generally going to fall into that same problem. What you should do is put them into a highly curated, focused event, calling like a sunset, basically, engagement, and try to get those people who are now engaging and try to get them to buy something or do some type of action like an add to cart or something further than just an open ultimately. All right, Chase,
Yeah.
naturally people are going to ask this question because they all ask, what tools or platforms should people use for list activation? Like, people are going to ask that question, like, what tools are going to be helpful here?
Yeah, so obviously it starts with the ESP. I'm a little biased, Jimmy's a little biased. We're using OmniSend for my newsletter. They're a sponsor. They're fantastic. So OmniSend has been our go-to. Obviously, right, there's others like Klaviyo, MailChimp, etc. And the nice thing about these three major ones is they do let you segment by kind of the last activity date
Yep.
and automate kind of a re-engagement series. So OmniSend's the preferred, but any of those should be sufficient. And then I'd say like the verification services. So we talked about those a little bit ago, but to kind of remind you, so it'd be things like Kickbox. I think we mentioned Never Bounce, Zero Bounce, etc. Again, these are going to be helpful for helping you clean your list to avoid bounces and all these types of spam traps. And then deliverability monitoring. So you've heard Jimmy talk about this at length. I've talked about it. Having tools like Google Postmaster, which is free, which is the data from the source from Google, which not many people have access to, right? Like the ESPs don't track that as closely as Google's going to give to you. Yahoo Sender Hub, Microsoft has their own, leveraging kind of the ESPs and seeing kind of what their tools are saying, etc. So that's really important to make sure that your domain reputation holds up, is intact, there's no issues. And then lastly, as mentioned before, the preference center is a big one. So many ESPs allow you to build kind of this preference center that allows people to adjust their frequency. So if you're a daily sender, maybe people only want to receive the Monday one or the Tuesday one, or maybe they want to receive all of them except for the Friday. And Jimmy set this up for our own personal newsletter as well. And it's a great way to allow people to stay involved that maybe just want to hear from you once or twice a week. They don't need 5 emails, right? So it saves the unsub in a way that's strategic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You always want to think about it that way too. All right. I want to flip gears and talk about quick wins and long term nurture thoughts here, because I think that when people think about this, they always think about the short term. And like the
Yep.
short term win is something simple. Like you offer a 24-hour flash sale or exclusive discount to respark an interest. And that's great for a smaller, earlier segment of people who may be still somewhat proactively in your group. But when you're thinking long term and you're thinking about folks that are mildly engaged, these are people who are 6, 12, 1 year old potentially, it's better to be thinking about them in more of a gentle drip, right? Of fresh content over weeks, months to rebuild that trust, right? Like you have to really think about the nurture part of things when you're
Yes.
going through here.
100%, dude. I totally agree with you. And, you know, essentially, right, like once people open and click, keep nurturing them so they don't lapse again, right? Like these are the people that you want to handhold. So consider inviting them to like a loyalty program, sharing helpful content, getting their take and their weigh in on stuff. When people have the ability to contribute, they feel invested, right? They feel like they've given you something, so they want to stick around and see what happens.
Absolutely. And I think that you're 100% right about that. I think nurturing people and thinking about like, how do I get those people to really engage and re-engage, or to make at least a purchase so you're making something off of them? Those are
Yeah.
thoughts that have to go into your head. I don't think there's a right or wrong here, but I do think you have to be very clear what you're trying to get out of it. All right, Chase, I want to think about a little bit of a hypothetical situation. I
Okay.
like these, right? Let's say your clothing brand that hasn't mailed half their list in a year, right? They create a
Okay.
short engagement series and they send a targeted one of 6 months active with like a 15% off code, and they
Okay.
watch your bounces and complaints. If it's good, they attempt a 1 year, but only in small batches. What would you do next?
So, okay, so we're going to
So yeah,
6 months.
the first one got to 6 months inactives with the 15% off code.
Yeah.
They watched the bounces, it was good, and they went after the 1 year group, but
Yeah.
only in small batches, and that went well. Where do
Cool.
they go
Okay.
next?
So I'd say like after the few emails that you're sending, like I guess the 2 emails that you're going to send, whoever doesn't engage, right? In this case, whoever doesn't open or click, they should just be removed, right? The brand might see maybe, I don't know, 5, 10, 15% reactivation from a 6 month engage, and maybe a 3%, give or take plus or minus a couple percent from like the 1 year. And then the rest is just be pruned. So the list will be smaller, but it is going to be healthier. And at the end of the day, list size is a vanity metrics. It's all about engagement.
100%. I love that, man. All right. We're getting to the end of this pod. I want to wrap it up. So basically, here's like the 5 things I heard here today. Segment by inactivity timeline, right? Like you want to look at their inactivity work backwards, purchasers versus buyers. 2, when you think about it, don't think about it as a single email approach. Think about it as a multi-email personalized approach, meaning the more data and more information that you have to use with the user, the better it's going to turn out. You also want to slowly warm up those older segments, layer it on, blended. That's what Chase calls it, which I love. Slowly warm them up or work them up with volume. So if you're sending 100K today, send 110K today. Even if you don't send in the same email, you only want to blend with your overall volume. Then you want to monitor the deliverability and compliance carefully. You want to pay attention to what's happening, those unsubs, those spam complaints, those open rates and click rates. All of those data points are very important to watch. They're going to be lower than your normal. That's okay. But you need to be careful that you're not blowing yourself up. And then at the end of all of that, the last tip is really sunset those who don't engage. No need to keep him. Eventually, there's a point of no return. You got to let him go because they're not engaging.
Dude, that was a great wrap up. So that, I guess, kind of concludes the deep dive we did on list reactivation. Now we've got this to send to community members, people on social, people on our newsletter that ask about this because it is such an important topic, right? A lot of people are sitting on an old list. And at the end of the day, hopefully this is helpful for them to be able to re-engage a percentage of them and convert them into customers. And if you guys listen to this and convert them to customers, I think you guys owe us a coffee. No, just kidding. But again, remember, the last thing I want to say, and then I'll pass it over to Jimmy, is it's better to have a smaller engaged list than a big list full of ghost, right? People that are just going to make you pay more to your ESP, that are going to add no value, that are actually going to hurt you. And for those that do re-engage, treat them like VIPs, right? They're giving you a second chance. So give them kind of the full treatment and don't let them build kind of the same habits they had before. So once you re-engage them, just try to keep them.
Yep. And I'll add one last item to all of this, right? All and everything we do all starts with having a good product or service. You're not going to revive people who hate your product or hate your service. If there's a product problem, it's not a marketing problem. And no matter how great your email or SMS is going to do, it ain't going to fix it. I just want to kind of reiterate that to make sure that people do remember you can't make magic with email or SMS, no matter how good you are, if the product sucks ultimately. So it's always important. With that, Chase, that's a wrap. Episode 28, list reactivation, how to approach those aged leads. If you enjoyed this pod today, make sure you subscribe, follow, leave us a rating on your favorite podcast listening platform, aka give us 5 stars if you enjoyed us. If you didn't enjoy us, give us a star because you hated it. Please let us know so we know how to make ourselves better. You can follow this show on X, LinkedIn, YouTube, IG, TikTok, etc. Here's what's up. There's a few ways to connect with us. First and foremost, you heard about it in the beginning. You heard about it through us. We have this community, and we have like 350, 360, 370 members now and continue to grow. It's a paid retention marketing community. It's for people like you and I, Chase and I. If you love email, you love SMS, you want to talk about this stuff, you want to get reviews, deliverability, that's all in their community. Link in the show notes somewhere. Secondly, you can join our newsletter, ecomemailmarketer.com. We drop a newsletter every day about retention marketing. You may not want it every day. We have a preference center. Don't worry. But if you do, you can get that email every day. Third, we are also found on social personally. Chase, where do they find you?
Most platforms, Chase, no A in Dimond.
Amazing. And me, you can find me mostly on LinkedIn and X, though I may start doing some threads action here. So I'm working towards actually adding another channel. So excited here, Chase. Great pod here today. Next week, we're back with episode 29. We're going to talk about Welcome Series Mastery, going beyond the basics for lasting engagement. I think we haven't talked enough about this. I see it too often. I subscribe to brands. I'm very disappointed in a lot of brands, and I want to talk about what they should be doing. So with that, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
From the open to the click, they're the masters of the flow. Just watch your list grow and your leads turn to go. Did we retain you so far, or do we have to extend it? If you want results, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it. Yeah, you know you gotta send it.